Welcome to Talking Late Night, where we spotlight top comedians and their late night influences. Here's your host, Max Kantor.
Hey, Will, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Max. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I've seen a couple of your sketches performed, and I've visited Highwire, and you're a writer there.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a sketch comedy writer.
Sketch comedy writer. Do you perform at Highwire too?
So actually, this week, I don't know when this goes out, but this week I'm doing a show on the 6th of July called, well, it's a solo sketch performance show. So I will have written and I'll also be performing my own sketches.
Well, very cool. We'll talk about Highwire a little later in the show, but to just jump in, this is a Talking Late Night. Like I said, excited to have you, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about late night comedy, late night sketches and hosts, and how they've had an impact on you and growing up. If you watched any, what stands out in your mind when I say late night?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a classic comedy nerd, right? So, when YouTube became a thing, if we're going to start chronologically, I sort of discovered Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows.
Okay.
Which is the show that Carl Reiner got his start on, and Carl Reiner later went on to produce All in the Family. And so I would watch Sid Caesar because he was such a funny character actor. And I was doing a lot of children's theater, so I would just sort of research all these old comedians. And the idea of kind of the modern sitcom got started on Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows. And Sid Caesar, if you haven't heard of Sid Caesar, is the coach in the movie Grease.
Okay.
The guy who's going to rid him and roll him around. And that's actually Sid Caesar as an old guy. But he was, if you YouTube Sid Caesar, one of the funniest comedians ever. And that was sort of arguably the beginning of late night as I know it. Then I would watch some of the Johnny Carson clips, again, mostly on YouTube, I think. Or I remember you'd be watching infomercials in, I guess, the 90s. They'd be like, the Johnny Collection, and they would show funny clips of Johnny talking to people. And so I always enjoyed that and watching him interview Dean Martin and Don Rickles and then mostly just watching David Letterman with my dad. He had that real kind of dry sense of humor. And so I would watch Letterman with my dad. So I think it became kind of a bonding thing. My dad could always sort of talk to me and we'd talk about what we saw on Letterman last night, or we'd watch it together. Because I don't remember when bedtime was.
Right.
But I could just watch usually the monologue. And then by the time the interviews came, my dad would be like, son, go to bed. So that's kind of was like my intro to late night.
So you're a very classic guy. Like all your beginnings in comedy are with very classic older people.
Yeah, man. I've always kind of been an old soul, I guess, in that way. But I loved Elvis when I was growing up because he had cool hair. I loved Danny Zuko or John Travolta in Grease. And so that era I was sort of fascinated with. And then I started learning about the comedians. And then my grandfather I still have it, the Dean Martin variety show DVD set. And so it's Dean Martin interviewing like Bob Newhart comes on that show, and so many wonderful classic comedians that kind of got their start around that time. And so yeah, that was really influential. I feel like I guess I'm kind of old school in that way for somebody that's my age.
Yeah, well, that's super cool. I think back how you're saying, as a kid you were watching Sid Caesar and Johnny Carson and all those things. What was that like as a kid when you go to school and you're like, guys, on David Letterman last night, it was the funniest. And everyone's like, we don't really watch David Letterman.
That's funny, man. I think rather than referencing what I'd seen on those shows, I would sort of try to be like those guys.
Okay.
And one of the first comedic things I ever did. So now that I'm into comedy, I'm like less of a Leno guy, I guess, because I don't know. He's funny. He's made a career. He drives cars, whatever. He has a big chin. But the fact that he had a big chin, I think as a kid, I just thought was hilarious. And so I did like a book report or something in an elementary school, and I wore a blazer, and I was like, this has been Jay Leno, the big chin boy. Which, if you're in second grade, kills with an audience. So yeah, I think they were just so personal and so kind of Mr. Life of the Party that I tried to kind of emulate that. And I was like a little fat and probably not cool in a lot of ways because like my parents, I don't know, I didn't have all the fancy clothes. So I think comedy or being personable or being the life of the party was kind of how I would relate to people. So, and these guys were kind of my icons in a way. I mean, because they were, I think like a lot of these late night guys, I mean, Colbert's kind of good looking, but they're not like the best looking people. Do you know what I mean? They're like a little bitter, they're snarky. And so yet here they were making people laugh, and they were cool to me. So it's funny because when I look back now, because I wasn't like really into that, or I loved comedy, but I hadn't decided I was going to devote my life to this at that point. But it kind of makes sense that I was fascinated by these guys and the way they behaved, and I tried to emulate that in my behavior.
So when you watch these shows, I'm not familiar with Sid Caesar enough, but I think that's super cool that you are, and definitely I'm going to look into that and learn about him.
Man, his writers, let me tell you who Sid Caesar's writers were. Mel Brooks, Larry Gelbart, Neil Simon, right? Sitting in a room with and Carl Reiner.
It's like the all-star team.
That's what I'm saying, man. Oh man, if you think of Woody Allen. Woody Allen was in that room. I know. Imagine sitting in that writer's room.
That is insane.
Oh man, it's insane. That's what led. So I love Mel Brooks, right?
Right.
So that's what led me to well, how'd these guys get their start? They all worked in the Sid Caesar's writing room, writer's room. The play Laughter on the 23rd Floor is based on that writer's room.
Wow.
And I think is he called King Kaiser? He might be, no. So here's another reason I know about this. So there's a musical called My Favorite Year.
Okay.
Which is based on the Sid Caesar, where they make this variety show. And so it's sort of early Saturday Night Live, basically, but I think it was an hour and a half live show. And so Neil Simon, who wrote Laughter on the 23rd Floor, a very funny playwright, I got to do that show and play Sid Caesar's character. So that's when I started researching it. And then I was also consequently, it's weird, I didn't think about this until right now. I later did My Favorite Year, which was the musical that was based on Sid Caesar and being in that writer's room. So imagine those funny people all sitting together. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I would love to have been a fly on the wall. You know?
Yeah. It's like what I said before. That's like an all-star group. Like, you have the best of the best sitting all together. I mean, I can't even. They must have had so many good ideas that I want to know which ideas were thrown away.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, which ideas didn't get picked.
Where's the vault, or where's the stuff like, we'll never get this on TV, right?
Right. Yeah. I want to know. Wow. So when you were a kid and even a teenager, maybe young adult, and you're watching Sid Caesar and Johnny Carson, David Letterman, like you said, what did you watch for? What drew you to it?
Well, I mean, they were making a lot of commentary always. I think a lot of political commentary. So, and I didn't really watch The Daily Show at that age. And I think, my parents were always very aware politically. And I don't know. I remember when I had to learn that people thought it was weird to be gay. Like, I grew up in a very just like a liberal, accepting household. And so yeah, I think these guys could sort of talk about that. As a kid, I also think that you maybe don't get to have those conversations, right? I mean, I teach right now, I teach improv to some high school kids, and they're very political, and I have to kind of ignore some of the things they say or just not endorse any point of view necessarily. And I think a lot of the educational system is like that. So where else as a kid can you feel like an adult and talk politics and be able to talk to your dad about the political climate through a joke that that Letterman made?
Right.
So I wonder if there's something to it where, as a kid, you can watch these guys and feel like you're part of the adult conversation. And because it's through comedy, it's sort of acceptable because, like, I don't know, CNN is boring. I still think CNN is boring, but as a late night, it may, I mean, you could argue that it brings people together of different age groups and you, and also I think you and your family can laugh about something that's topical and do it together. So there's probably a family element to it.
Yeah. It's I agree with what you said, where like you watch CNN and it's boring and you watch Fox News and it's boring, or MSNBC. It's just, the people say this week and blah, blah, blah. But then you get, you have Jimmy Kimmel stand up there and he's like, well, this week this happened. And then you're like, I did not know that. And then you learn, but at the same time, there's a joke in it too.
Right.
So it helps you remember it. And then you feel, if it's funny enough, you're like, hey, let me share this information with others. So in a way, you could argue that a lot of people, especially younger people today who don't want to watch the news, the boring news, are turning to these late night shows to learn what's happening in the world through a comedic lens.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I mean, since the election, I read the New Yorker, but that's it. I mean, if something big happens, I'll look up the New York Times, but I get all my news mostly from the comedy shows now because it's somehow easier to swallow from, Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, or I used to watch Colbert, and now I'll watch him on YouTube on, from his show now, The Tonight Show. I don't know. I can't even listen to NPR anymore. I just get sad.
Yeah.
It's easier to swallow. And I still like Bill Maher. I know he's been in the news a lot lately, but he says, I think, I like his point of view, and I like kind of the directness of some of the things he says. So yeah, I agree, man. I think, that's why John Oliver was on the cover of Rolling Stone. Guy's a rock star, man.
People are turning to the comedy to find out the news.
Well, they do such a good job of synthesizing it, right? I think, I don't know if it's Colbert or Jon Stewart that said they have the moles in the basement that just click around on the computers all day. They watch the news for me and share the important bits. It's synthesized. I don't know. I mean, then also, that was a Colbert, I think, said after the election that the news, do you know which bit I'm referencing? It was like Colbert's bit right after the election.
Well, I know there's been a lot with Colbert.
That's true. It was, I think it was the day after the election. And he said, I think we just need a break from politics. Politics used to be something that you'd sit down and maybe talk for an hour about twice a week.
Yeah.
Right. But with these 24-hour news cycles now, it's just constant. And he was sort of like, we don't have to always obsess about this sort of thing. And I've kind of taken that to heart, and I'm so much happier. I don't feel less aware, but I don't know. It's just, it's, you can watch it, you can feel informed, you can stay abreast to what's going on, but then still enjoy your life. I mean, I don't know. Can we get political here?
Yeah. I mean, who cares?
All right.
Talk about whatever we want.
Great. I love this. Podcasts are great for that. I was kind of devastated at first after the election. Like, how could this happen? And then I sort of realized, well, I don't need to let that influence my life, and then people like Colbert who get up on a national stage and say, hey, it's all going to be all right. That's so important. So that's so important, man.
So let me tell you about this. I was reading an article featuring Norm Macdonald just a couple weeks ago, and Norm Macdonald said he was talking about politics in comedy, and he commented that comedians should be moving away from focusing on Trump and focusing more on other issues as well. He said it was getting too Trump absorbed and Trump, targeting just him. And for me, sometimes when you watch these either late night monologues or like you were saying, John Oliver or Stephen Colbert, whoever, the entire thing will just be about, it'll be Trump, 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 end of show. So in one way, I think it's important to comment on what's happening. Definitely. And to get your news, like we were saying. But on the other hand, I think we should also be looking at other issues. Do you agree with that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, if you talk to anyone else at Highwire Comedy, where I teach here in Atlanta, and you should take classes, they do a show weekly called Good Evening Tonight, which you came to see.
Yep, I've seen it twice.
And that's their political show. And, they learned pretty quickly that a Trump joke sucks the air out of the room because a lot of people are tired of it. So on some level, I do think it's important if there's news. And, for example, Weekend Update is a news parody show.
Exactly.
But what I love about John Oliver is that, he points you in a different direction. It's tough to say. I think you could get into the semantics of the sort of responsibility of a comedian, right? Well, the responsibility of a comedian is to make people laugh.
Right. That's the goal.
So, yeah, I think if you do political satire, I think there's some issues you cannot ignore. But I also think, I think it's important to look around and not be so focused. Though I got to tell you, on the other hand, it's funny. I'm going back and forth. He's such an easy target, and there's just so much to say.
Right.
I don't know, man. It's hard to say. Like, I mean, I love Norm Macdonald. I think he's hilarious. But then also part of me goes, well, write what you want to write if you're a comedian, Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think I agree. On one hand, I could just not watch the show. Like you said, it's the comedian show. They can talk about whatever they want. If it's John Oliver, the show is called Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. So he can talk about whatever he wants. But on the other hand, like personally, when John Oliver first started, I watched every single week. Me and my dad loved it. I thought he was the most creative and funny guy, cracked me up. And then once the election started, or well, the process to the election, it started becoming a little bit more just Trump related, but it wasn't completely. It was like, 15, 20%. And now I can't watch it anymore because it's just the same joke to me over and over and over again. And I'm fine. Like you said, there's plenty of material to make fun of. Plenty. I mean, it's almost every day. It's almost daily. You could find a joke from something he does. But I think it's time to maybe always, like you said, include a joke here and there, like Weekend Update. It is the week, review. But I think there are hundreds of things that happen in a day, thousands of things that happen in a day. You can find anything to talk about. So I wish it would be more focused on that and less, jokes that suck the air out of the room, like how you were saying with Highwire.
Yeah, well, and part of what was fun about that show is, I loved learning about FIFA and
right,
was it Where Are the Dancing Zebras?
Right. Yep. Or talking about, or health labels on cigarettes.
Oh, that was
a
great.
thing.
Yeah. Or even on produce, right, where you could stick.
Right. They did on produce. They did stuff on Olympic stadiums. Like that is stuff that is quality stories and information that you don't see that every day in the news. They're not talking about the stadiums, the Olympic stadiums that are rotting in places like Greece and Brazil. But he used to cover that. Like that used to be the focal point, is bringing attention to these issues that we aren't really aware of.
Well, and arguably, I haven't been as consistent either with John Oliver. And I have access I have HBO, so I should probably catch up. I don't know. Though, it's funny you say that, because I think part of the reason with that show is it's so truthful that might be why I don't watch, is because it's funny, man. Because, when you write comedy, I think when you're in any creative art, you have to, it helps me to be in a good place emotionally. Mm-hmm. And that's hard sometimes because you got to pay bills. You've got to, deal with life. You got to deal with politics. And when there's so much negativity and so much kind of uncertainty and the healthcare law and all these things coming out, it sometimes the last thing you want to do is sit down on the page and be funny. Mm-hmm. And I'm writing this sketch, or I've got to finish up this week, and it's like the dumbest premise. It's so stupid, but I mean, it's such a good time, and it's not political in it. Well, it's typically generally not political in any way, and it's funny because I think if I don't lift myself up and do things that are nice for myself and be positive and try to, have some sort of stability emotionally and be in a good place, then it's really hard to sit down and write jokes. Mm-hmm. And so that might be part of why I haven't watched that show in particular. Because because it's funny with John Oliver, I laugh, I learn something, and then I want to cry.
Uh-huh. Yep.
God, the world's such a fucked up place.
Right.
So, and I think Lily feels the same way. And I mean, I don't want to say that we still try to be aware of the world, but also I think it's really important just to keep my head up because it's such a tremulous kind of media world right now, and that's why I don't listen to NPR anymore.
Well, you make a good point. Comedians are there to make us laugh and to make us smile. They've been throughout history. There's always been. You go back to caveman times, and when the dinosaur ate the one guy, there was always the one maybe fat caveman who would fall down and get everyone to laugh. There's always you need that. You really do. You always need those people. Comedians are critical. That's critical, true. Whether they're on late night, stand up, improv, anywhere. Maybe not professional, anybody.
Although
critical.
There's the other side of it where, some of the funniest stuff I've ever written has been because of something traumatic I was going through. So
interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a catch-22. But I guess when you're writing sketch in particular, sometimes it tends to be over the top and silly and ridiculous. And so it's fun to go and show up on the page in a way that you're going to play and you're going to enjoy it and you're going to say silly things, but then I guess I had a breakup once and I wrote this solo sketch and it killed on stage, and it was all about failed relationships. And one of my favorite jokes from that bit, I used to do this cranky cabaret in New York, and the whole premise was people are just pissed off about stuff, getting up on stage, and I would write these song parodies about bad relationships, and one of them was I went down on my girlfriend for the first time, and when I looked up, she was texting. Imagine, you know. Anyways, so yeah, I forgot what we were talking about.
well, we started talking about late night. It went, but hey, that's why I like this. We just have a natural conversation. We see where it takes us. But you were talking about, writing sketches, because that is what you do now. You are a writer for Highwire, and also kind of for yourself a bit. So why don't you talk about what it's like to be a sketch writer at Highwire, and tell people who are listening who don't really know what Highwire is or what they do.
Right. So Highwire is a comedy theater in Atlanta, and it's a fun place because they're relatively new to the scene, where you can still go through the program and get stage time, and there's a lot of opportunities there. There's going to be auditions for sketch teams coming up, I think, in August, so you can look out for that. There's a couple of video teams actually that are looking for actors and writers now. So it's a really kind of avant-garde place where it's funny because, you become an institution like UCB or the Magnet or Groundlings, and, the people who've come through your program and gained and garnered success almost force the theater itself to become institutionalized on some level. And I think that it then becomes difficult to get stage time because the word's out and everybody wants to come there. Where part of learning to be good at this, in addition to learning and taking classes, which are so valuable, is actually getting to do the work and putting up material and getting in front of an audience and become a person on a house team, whatever. And, if you're at a more established institution, I mean, I studied at UCB Theater in New York. That's where I kind of started officially getting into comedy. I took their improv and sketch classes. There was a 10-year waiting list to get on stage, just because they've had so many great people go through that program. And so, not that it wouldn't have happened for me eventually there, but I didn't want to wait 10 years. So I moved to Atlanta, and Highwire's a little new. So it's very cool. It's edgy. It's avant-garde. They do a lot of really fun shows, and it's a really great community to belong to. So I think if you want to do comedy, belonging to an institution like that is a good way to go, because you meet people, you have kind of connections, and you lift each other up. It's collaborative. And comedy, more so even than theater, I think, is collaborative in terms of the performers and the writers really working together. I think most playwrights are solo, Even Tarantino talks about the way he writes, even screenwriters to some extent. But sketch, comedy writing, you sit in the writer's room, and you may come in with a great premise, but then you have 10 comedians throwing good ideas at you. So yeah, that's what I do now, is I write and direct sketch comedy there. I teach level 1, which is the beginning class, and then I also teach the advanced class, which culminates in a live performance. So I help kind of get the sketches ready, and then I get the second half of the class. I get to work with the actors and kind of put it together from start to finish, and we create original sketch comedy shows.
That's very cool. So you moved from New York City to Atlanta.
I did. I moved about a year ago, February. Yeah.
So tell me about that, how that transition, because obviously going from New York to Atlanta, it's different. They're two very different cities.
Yeah, I mean, I think I moved to New York when I was doing musical theater, and I thought I wanted to be on Broadway. Then I don't know, man. Let's see. I mean, that's sort of, so I mean, I was always kind of like a writer, and I was always a little funny on stage. I would do these like characters in plays and musicals, but then I did The Artist Way, which is a great book that I don't know if you've heard of. But it's a creative recovery program for artists, because I was going on auditions all the time and I was just miserable. I hate auditioning. Oh God, you got to get up and get dressed, like comb your hair and put shit in your hair and ride the train. And then if it's hot, you're sweaty. And then if it's cold, you're cold, and you don't want to get there too early because there's not like waiting areas in New York. And, like in Atlanta, LA, even, you can sit in your car. Right. You are your car.
Right.
And then like I had a bike, and I never fucking could get my bike to tie up in the right, I was always afraid it'd get stolen, and that was always the thing. So anyways, you go to auditions, and the year I decided not to quit acting, because I'm still an actor, but that I wanted to go a different direction was the 100-year anniversary of World War I, which was, I guess, 2012, maybe 2013. And I auditioned for 10 plays that year. And they were all these World War I plays, because I was young. I looked like a GI, I guess. I had a short haircut at that time. And I just was so miserable. There were these monologues just like, yes, running in the trenches, the smell of the latrine, watching my comrades die in battle. Like just the most heart-wrenching
Right.
monologues, you know? And
Right.
I write
Oh
to my wife back home, and it was
Uh-huh.
so sad. And I want to do that. I was like, what am I doing? I'm silly.
Right.
So I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I said, well, what am I going to do? I'm in New York. So I took an improv class. And that was kind of, so then I realized, okay, improv's great. But I really think, I heard someone say this recently. This is bold. Can I say who said it? Yeah, I guess I can say who said it. Sarah Garr is like a wonderful, very pregnant sketch comedian in Atlanta who you should interview because she's amazing. She said, improv is a training tool, not an art form. That's going to be like controversial probably. It is an art form, and improv can be very entertaining. But in terms of turning comedy into a career, no one ever makes it doing improv. You do improv and then you go do a movie. You do improv and then you start writing for yourself.
Interesting.
So, right. You're a young guy. I love that you're doing this because, God, I wish someone had said that to me like 5 years ago, you know? Then again, I figured it out pretty quickly where I was like, okay, well, what do you do now? You have a team, you get on stage, you're still just making shit up, you know, which is great. But that's all writing is to me, as I'm improvising on the page, except sketch writers get to revise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
True.
But yeah, so improv is a training tool, I think. But I started doing improv, and then I was like, oh, I guess I'm kind of funny. And then I was writing original sketch with my guitar, and I have this character called Sad Man that I do, who's just, it's kind of a heightened version of me when I'm feeling depressed. And so there was one about relationships. There was one about all the times I've been fired. I've been fired a lot.
A lot. Like the average person, I'm assuming, gets fired maybe like 2 to 3 times in their life. More than that?
Oh, many more times than that.
Wow.
Many more times than that.
What, like double digits? Double digits firing?
Probably. I mean, I don't know, man. Yeah, I guess.
Wow.
Well, I think I used to have a problem with authority.
Okay.
But I think the managers, look, when you're a creative artist, now I'm justifying it. You're it's always about the art.
Right.
So the job is just what you have to do so you can go to your next audition or pay for your next UCB class. I got an audition once for Universal in Japan, and I was Austin Powers. So I did like that sort of dialect thing, and I went in and did it. And then I was also Dr. Evil, and I put the stupid thing together. And they were going to hire me. Well, they called me back for a callback, and I didn't go to my restaurant job to open brunch because fucking wine, of course, you know. Well, I got fired. It was this like old Turkish guy. I don't regret living in New York. It's miserable, but I don't regret it. And he's like, I don't think it's working to continue working with you working here. And I remember like, I think I just got fired, but I wasn't sure.
Right.
You email too much, you know? And so, because I was always requesting days off for shows and whatever.
Right.
Every job, so that's part of it. It's just that every job has always been second fiddle. And then I like told off this manager at Ruby Tuesdays in college, the Cheesecake Factory. I've had a lot of weird jobs, man. But anyways, so yeah, I got out of that. I was doing comedy, doing sketch. And then New York was expensive. I no longer had a real reason to be there. I couldn't be creative as much because I was spending so much time worrying about rent and food and the freaking subway. And so, yeah, I moved to Atlanta because I wanted a better life and I wanted to still be creative.
That's awesome. I think the highlight of that story for me was Universal Japan.
Yeah.
That is like, I didn't even know that Japan had a Universal.
Yeah, they have one in Osaka, and they hire street performers to like do comedy there.
Did you ever visit?
So I worked for Tokyo Disney.
So you went to Tokyo? And
yeah, I actually was in Tokyo for the biggest earthquake in the history of.
Wait, like the
Fukushima one. Yeah.
You were there?
I was there. Yeah.
Okay, you gotta tell me what that was like.
Oh, God,
that
man,
experience.
it was nuts. So I'd only been there 2 weeks. I was living in Orlando at the time because before New York, I did Disney, and I was friends with a certain scurvy pirate, which you probably heard about.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I was working for Nickelodeon as a host for Slime Time Live.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because when I graduated college, I didn't want to go to New York right away because I just didn't feel like the right time. The economy was awful. Shows and theaters were closing. Or it was right when the recession hit, which is, I guess, 2009, which was when I graduated. So I was like, oh, great, I'm going to be an actor. And then there was no jobs anywhere.
Oh,
so I moved to Orlando because Disney World wasn't going to close.
It's true. And yeah.
So I got work there. And then I auditioned for Tokyo Disney. And it was the ballet training that I had in college that got me that job because there was this like very old, very skinny ballet man, and the way I had my arms out, and I just could see it be like, very good, very good. So they hired me to be Captain Jack, friends with Captain Jack. You're not allowed to say it. I think I signed my life in blood once that I wouldn't admit to anybody that I would.
Right, you were just a friend.
It was a friend of Captain Jack Sparrow, the pirate from. I was just friends. And then I was also going to be Aladdin, and I was going to do all sorts of stuff for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I get there, I move into an apartment. The Japanese are very nice. I had my own place. It was great. I was going to make all this money. I was going to be gone for a year.
Wow.
It was a 13-month contract. And then 2.5-3 weeks into it, the biggest earthquake in the history of Japan.
Oh my God.
Happened. So we're on the second floor of this building, backstage.
So you were at the park.
Yeah, I was at the park when it happened. And we were learning the bunny hop choreography for the Easter parade. Which, even in that moment, I was there to be Captain Jack. I don't know what show I was in where there was going to be this. Oh, it was so embarrassing. I was like hopping. It was awful. Thank you, earthquake, because now I never had to fucking bunny hop, you know? So we're hopping, and then it starts like shaking a little. I was like, boy, maybe I should lose some weight. You know, it's like, you just imagine like, the building's a little, but then it gets worse and worse. And at first, the Japanese handler, I guess, was like, oh, everyone just sit down, like it's an earthquake. And then all of a sudden you watched his face change from a smile from, oh, look at these silly Americans having their first earthquake. Because, like, you know, earthquakes are common in Japan.
Right.
To, oh no, get out of the building, get out of the building. And we went down the stairs, and that was when it was the worst. And I swear to God, I'm going down the stairs, I'm shaking the room. I can't really describe it. I guess it was like being on a roller coaster. Because the whole world's moving. You don't know what's up and down, right? And so I'm grabbing onto the railing, and I'm thinking of my ballet training. I think because the tendency was to fall because we're going down fucking stairs, you know?
Right.
So I was just thinking, stay lifted and you'll make it out. And I stayed lifted. We get out of the building, and I'm holding onto a chain link fence, just shaking, right? Just trying to not flail. We get down to the floor, concrete's cracking all around us, and we spend... Okay, so then this is funny. Whenever there's a big earthquake, it does something to the atmosphere. I'm not a scientist. Where it rains.
What?
Yeah, like clouds. I don't know. You have to check up on... I would love for you to like kind of be like, I looked up in Wikipedia what Will was talking about, and it's a real thing. The atmosphere, something to do with the atmosphere, because it often after a big earthquake, it'll cloud up and rain. Then the wind's blowing, so it feels like an apocalypse moment, you know?
Right.
So I'm there, and it's raining, but like none of the buildings are cleared. And then eventually we were able to go inside. Well, there's 50,000 people in the park as this happens. And Disney Sea so there's two parks there. Disneyland, which is like the Magic Kingdom, or Disneyland in California. And then there's Disney Sea, which doesn't exist anywhere else. The whole park is water themed. And so there's all these bridges. Which,
oh my God.
Yeah. And so some of them have collapsed, and it's insane. So, I mean, I guess this could go on forever, but long story short, so we eventually get back to our apartment building, which was cleared. Mm-hmm. And we were living on reclaimed land, which is where they dump a bunch of shit in the ocean and build on top of it, which is not as solid as just land. Right. That's Urayasu was the name of our kind of area. And in Urayasu, there was no water, and we did have power. So you're sponge bathing with these like emergency water bags just to keep yourself clean. And we didn't have power the first day. Eventually we got power. So that night, and oh my gosh, is it here? Okay, you can see right here on this shelf, there's a tiny dancing bear.
Oh, the bear.
And he's got Japanese writing on him, right? We're in my apartment. So I go to not the Home Depot, whatever the Japanese Home Depot is, to get a flashlight because the power's out. Okay.
Don't tell me.
Sold out completely. The only light source that they have available is this stupid color changing dancing bear. So that night in my apartment, you look and there's all these sort of like candles in the windows and things, and I'm looking like I have a disco party because of this fucking color changing bear. Yeah, man. Oh, I love that this is still here for this story.
That's awesome.
So it was crazy. Long story short, then the radiation gets bad. There was like mud, and then it dries, and there was wind, and everyone's wearing these like surgical masks. It's like an apocalyptic movie.
Yeah, it was horrible.
And then I got evacuated. I got a Delta flight. We were evacuated because the radiation which is scary because it's invisible.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, my dad got me on a Delta flight actually, and the company paid for it. I mean, Disney evacuated all the performers. Mm-hmm. And then a month later, they tried to get us to come back, but things were uncertain. So I came back. I had no job. I had no money. I didn't know what I was going to do.
Right. I mean, you had committed. Like this was totally, and it had only been 2 weeks.
I'd given up my apartment. I had nowhere to live.
It'd been 14 days.
It sucked, man.
That is horrible. I mean, granted, that's a great story. That is a story you can have. I don't even know how many sketches you could write from that.
That's so
It's
true.
just like
Yeah.
that is like that
I
is a gold
survived.
mine in there. But that's scary.
It was
Like
tough.
that
man.
is terrifying. I can't even imagine that. I mean, it's hard to even picture an earthquake if you've never been in one. But I'm assuming that was your first earthquake.
Well, I mean, I grew up in California for a minute, so I remember a
Okay.
couple, but nothing ever this extreme.
Yeah, this
So,
was.
for all intents and purposes, it was my first.
So, have you ever been back to Japan since?
No, I had auditioned for that Osaka job, which
Mm-hmm.
I think I got another contract and didn't do it. Is what happened with that. I don't remember why I didn't take that job in Osaka, but yeah, I was willing to go back. I loved Japan. I mean, the people were so kind, and I actually loved the idea of playing Austin Powers and Dr. Evil because I think I would have had to do some like song and dance stuff at Disney, which I wouldn't have had. Which I love musical theater. Don't get me wrong, but my strength even then, I'm realizing, was comedy and improv. But to be Dr. Evil every day,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
it's amazing.
That's pretty awesome.
Or even Austin Powers, who's just so kind of overly sexual. That would have been
Right.
amazing.
Right.
And I mean, they worship the American performers in
Oh,
Japan.
they do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'd be walking from the train to the park just to go to rehearsal, and people are coming up taking pictures with you. And
Oh, wow. So you're like a little celebrity.
definitely, it was cool.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so you also worked down at Disney, regular Disney in Orlando.
Yeah, I had an equity contract as some pirate
Right. Some guy.
that shall go
unnamed.
unnamed. Yeah, it was a comedy show. It was me and Mac, who's kind of his, like, he's not in the movie Mac, but pirate companion. And it's called Jack Sparrow's Pirate Tutorial.
Wow. So does working, because I know you visit Disney as like a kid and even as an adult, and it's just a place like no other. I was in 11th grade, so like 2 years ago I went, and I was like, well, I don't know how amusing this is going to be for me. And I went, and I was like, this is clearly a lot better than any other amusement park because of the experience, like everything for me felt like an experience.
Yeah.
What's it like working it?
Oh man, that's tough. I like Disney, and I liked working there. But it is a machine. It's a big corporate machine. Most people, I think, didn't have it as good as I did because I had my own dressing room. I had creative costuming who makes custom costume for me, and I had the best makeup. And I mean, they go so far as to match the beard to my hair color.
Wow.
Yes.
They go, I mean, it just goes to show they go all out.
Well, and there's character
experience.
performers that do the meet and greet, and then there's the kind of equity performers who are it's more performative. And so you're really treated well. Now that being said, I had one of the most difficult shows on property because, in the afternoon, we were in the direct sun. That wig is hotter than hell. And you do 6 shows a day, and that's exhausting, man. I mean, I'd finish 6 shows and I was dead because you try to bring everything, right? I mean,
you want to give 100%.
Yeah, and I was always aware of how much people were paying to be there, and so I always really tried to give as much as I could. But yeah, it got old. I mean, the show got old, overall management was good. The rehearsals were good. I mean, you show up for 5 minutes, you get a 4-hour call because that was union rules. So even if you just come in for a fitting, you still get paid pretty well. And it was enough to make a living. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would do it again. I think if I worked for Disney, I would want to do it in maybe more of a writing capacity where I could sort of direct or maybe develop new shows. Because yeah, it got old. I mean, you literally do the same show now. Cool thing about our show though is I would invite the kids on stage and teach them to sword fight.
Oh, that is cool.
3 of them, and that was always fun because you never knew that was improv. Right. And that was when I would shine. So it's funny. I was always known for kind of blazing through the beginning because it's all just like put your hand up high, oh, put them down, oh, put a left hand, oh, put them down. It's kind of like it's stuff everything can do. And somehow they tie it into pirate. But the fun part was just like, now I need a volunteer. And that was always really fun.
Because you don't know what the kid's going to do. You don't know what they're going to say. And then it's like you said, that's where the improv component came from.
And when you can infuse improv in a show like that, people feel like they're a part of it. It's like, oh, that probably doesn't normally happen. Oh, cool.
Right. So that's a unique job. I would say most people have not had that experience that you've had. But what's your dream job? What's the dream job? in your opinion?
That's a great question, man. I mean, right now, so I'm writing. Well, it's funny you say that. So I always wanted to be a sketch writing teacher
Yeah,
because I would.
check.
Yeah, right. I know. I don't know. I'm good. Well, let's see. I want to live long enough to transfer from what do I want to do with my life to, oh God, I've squandered it.
Mm-hmm.
If I live that long, no.
Nice, good.
That's a heavy joke. It's fun. Well, so when I was taking classes at UCB, I just thought my sketch teachers were so smart and so funny, and so I thought I'd love to teach sketch comedy at UCB at the time. And then I moved to Atlanta, and like pretty quickly, after about a year and a half, they made me a sketch teacher, and I was like, wow, awesome. So I love doing it. I love teaching those classes. So at this point, yeah, I think I'd love to be a TV writer. And write on maybe a show, a comedy show, or kind of sell and produce my own. So we've written a pilot.
Very cool.
I wrote my first pilot this year.
Congrats.
Thanks,
I mean, that's
man.
a pretty big deal.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's a lot of work, man. I mean, this thing from the treatment, which is sort of a breakdown of the characters, to the so we shot a sizzle reel, and then to the pilot. It's been about a 6 to 8 month process. And I actually met today with the guy. We've got a pilot. So yeah, I think to either produce this or write a few more, and to get a job as a TV writer and just get to like live in the writer's room, making a living would be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's what I'd want to do. I'm still kind of learning what that world looks like. But yeah, man, just to be able to write and be creative, and then not have to, I guess just not have to do anything else besides be creative, really. Because I never wanted to be famous or even rich. I like, you're in my apartment. It's nothing fancy. But what we don't want for anything, but it's, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But just to make a living in comedy and not have to, I guess, worry about like, oh, I need to go have this job so that I can then do my comedy, but to get paid as a comedian. But teaching sketch feels like doing that in a way. I don't know. At this point, that's what I want to do.
So where do you see yourself going? 5 years from now?
It's
where do you
therapy,
see
man? Gosh. Wow. Well, like I say, to be in the writer's room. So to get a job on a show that I thought was really funny and felt like I could add to would be great. So to be a paid well as a comedy writer on a series, a sitcom would be cool. Whether it be a Netflix show or something for Amazon, or that would probably be pretty close to the dream. I think that might take me out of Atlanta if that happened.
To like LA or New York,
probably.
Or one of those places?
Yeah, so there is a development studio in Atlanta.
Okay.
But they're only kind of the only game in town. So most shows currently are still written in New York or LA. Now, if you're a screenwriter, you kind of write it and then hope it sells.
Right.
But a TV writer, you have to be there and you develop it and you have rewrites and whatnot. So yeah, I think that would kind of be the ideal. Or I could even imagine if I were above average as Lorne Michaels online, sort of Funny or Die, basically.
Yeah.
And they hire people that sort of write and create original content for them. So a job like that where I was paid to kind of write and produce my own stuff would be cool. Yeah. So in 5 years, I think I'd like to be doing that and just be a better writer, man. It's so funny. You go in the creative process where you'll write something like, I don't think this is funny. Is this funny? And then I'll read it to my girlfriend. I'll share it with a couple of friends, and they laugh. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is funny. I constantly question I always question myself, like, am I funny? But yeah, I guess a little. They
I
let
think
me.
You're funny.
Thanks, man.
You got, at least me. You got one.
Great,
Yeah.
Great. I'll take it, man. I'll take it. So yeah, to be working in comedy, have a career in comedy, and maybe buy a boat.
Any particular type of boat?
No.
Just a boat.
One, I mean, I don't think it should. I don't want a remote control boat
or like a canoe.
Maybe, yeah. You know what? A good kayak. I'd self propulsion. I ride my bike everywhere. I'd be into that.
Okay, so you would be okay with a canoe, hypothetically.
God, I could do that tomorrow. Some life coach once was like, "Live the life you want to live now. Don't wait."
I want a boat.
I want a boat.
Go buy a boat,
motherfucker.
So, I like to end my show with a last culminating question, and that question is: for someone who is aspiring to be in comedy or the entertainment business, or to be a writer like you are, sketch writer, or maybe even to work at Disney, who knows? What is a piece of advice you would give them? Something that you've learned over your years that you would tell somebody?
Ooh, that's a good question. Someone that wants to get into the entertainment business. Well, I would say, wow, that's tough. I mean, there's a million things that come to mind, but I think if you want to do this, find an organization or find some people that are doing what you want to do and find an excuse to be around them, because people like to work with their friends and people like to work together and collaboratively. And I mean, suddenly I'm a sketch teacher at Highwire, and I'm hanging out with Mark Kendall, who's an amazing guy in Atlanta, and talking to him after his show. And so it's like, I think just find people that are doing what you want to do, and go spend time with them, and belong to their organization, and show up. That's it. Show up. Don't sit in the basement or wherever and expect things to happen unless you're going to go and show up. And I mean, you got to learn the craft, learn how to do it. You got to put in the time. I mean, if you want to be a writer, go learn how to do it and then show up on the page, man. I mean, I spent a lot of hours this week writing one sketch, well, then I got up in front of class and it killed, but it was a lot of time. So you got to show up and do it every day, Yeah, so show up and learn the craft, and then be open to learning from people who are better than you. I mean, what a gift, And then I think it's a lot of advice, but finding your own voice too is important. Where, I mean, I'm in a sketch class right now with so many wonderful, talented solo people who can write and do their own stuff. Mm-hmm. But my sketch is going to be different than yours. You're going to bring something to the table that's different, and so. Kind of owning who you are. All right, I want to answer that in a more succinct way. All right, ask me again.
Okay, Will, I like to normally end my show with a culminating question, and that question is, if you could give somebody a piece of advice, someone who is aspiring to be in the comedy world or the entertainment world or do blah 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 blah, repeating what I just said, what is that piece of advice that you would give?
Find a group of people that are doing what you want to do, or an individual, and find excuses to be around them and see what you can learn. Belong to an organization and show up. Leave the house.
Yeah. And if you do that, you can go buy a boat.
Then you can get a boat.
That's what happens.
And live in the old Fourth Ward like I do.
The canoe is the goal.
That's right. Just a canoe. Just a canoe. Maybe I should just get a log and some whittling tools. I don't know.
Well, Will, I want to thank you so much for being on Talking Late Night. I appreciate it. You're a great improviser, great sketch writer. You're a great person. You're best friends with my cousins, how we met.
Yeah.
So it's been great knowing you. I mean, I'm going to continue to know you, but it's been great knowing you in the past and the future and the present as well. I appreciate it. You can check Will out at Highwire Comedy. It's in Atlanta, Georgia. So that was my phone. I apologize. I forgot to silence it. I even thought to myself, I'm going to silence this, and I still forgot. So be sure to check out Will at Highwire. Google Highwire. Look up their amazing sketch, improv, and stand-up classes. And anything you want to add to that, Will?
Well, yeah. Will and Alex on Funny or Die. We have a couple of our latest sketches that we've produced up there. So if you like our videos, click Funny. That'd be awesome.
Perfect. Check them out at Funny or Die. So thanks so much again, Will. And we will see you next time here on Talking Late Night.